for me, there are two game-changing recordings. How I encountered Pat. The first is that album I mentioned earlier, Consciousness. It came out in 1974, and it just has such a compelling album cover, black and white photo with this very mysterious figure, Rasputin-like gaze. It sort of called to me from the record bins. I didn't know who this cat was at all. I had previous to that, I was, I'm coming out of a rock experience of listening to all the Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Clapton, all those guys, leading into Zappa, which is a little jazzier, leading into fusion, and then somehow I got into Joe Pass. So my ears were adjusting, and now coming out of fusion, coming into jazz guitar, and I didn't know this guy. I wasn't, this Consciousness was brand new. It was 74. And I saw the album in the bins and I'm like, wow, it just something about it compelled me. When I put it on, I heard, the future of jazz guitar immediately on Impressions, the first track on that album. It was stunningly amazing to me. Similarly, some years later, not that many, only a few years later, Pat sort of played more into my fusion rootsy thing when he came out with Joyous Lake. This album was a huge game changer for me because it was aesthetically on that same level of Return to Forever and Weather Report, and a little more electric, fusion-oriented stuff. But his lines were still directly coming right out of Consciousness. And he melded that aesthetic of futuristic jazz guitar and this futuristic fusion thing. And for me, that album, in terms of energy, ideas, it was a complete left turn from the jazz guitar aesthetic of Joe Pass and Barney Kessel and those cats into something absolutely new. And so for me, both of those albums, Joyous Lake and Consciousness, were huge game changers, and I'd highly recommend them.
Joe, do you have a favorite Pat Martino recording or two?
I do. Mr. Milkowski is a little more well-versed on some of those early albums than I am. For me, personally, it was the first album I produced for him and the last. I say the first because it was live at Yoshi's, and it was with Joey DeFrancisco and Billy Hart. It was amazing. The crowd was so into it. I never witnessed anything like it. I mean, we had applause that would last for 10, 15 minutes. They wouldn't stop applauding. It was exciting. Of course, Joey DeFrancisco on organ, and I was a big Billy Hart fan. So it was exciting. It was well received. And for me, it's one of my favorite, and the last one, because it's formidable, and which we got the title of that CD from when Pat would describe somebody. If I'd say, what do you think of, Pat Bianchi? He's formidable. He liked that adjective. He used it a lot. So that's where we come up with formidable. And I so enjoyed that last CD because it was homogenized over 8.5 years with those two great players, Carmen and Tori and Pat Bianchi, and now we're able to record it and keep it forever. And I talked him into using two horns. At first, he wasn't into it, and then little by little, he did. I asked Pat Bianchi to pick out two players, and he did. And we did that last CD. So it means a lot to me when I listen to it. You know, just hearing those people come together after all those years and play, because they hadn't recorded before. I mean, I would hear them with stuff we recorded, and you know, everybody recorded the live performances, but this was special.
Pat, what are your thoughts on Pat Martino recordings that are your favorites? And you can include stuff that you're on as well.
Well, it's for me. It doesn't include me. I would have to say, even though it's not the best audio quality, the Young Guns record with Randy Gilespie and Gene Ludwig, and
Yeah.
to me, one thing that has always drawn me, and I know there's other recordings of Pat in this capacity, but one thing that has always recorded, I've always gravitated towards were live recordings. And sometimes the more gritty the live recordings are in terms of sound, not necessarily sound quality, but just in terms of it may not be 100% polished. It feels more human. There's things about that recording with Gene Ludwig and Pat that it feels like you're just like things are going to fall off the rails sometimes. I mean, there's just so much they're always going for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's not something you always can get in a recording studio, or you can find even if a series of gigs are recorded live with the intention of making a record. Something like this was probably just, a personal recording of Pat he made for himself, never intended to be released, so it's going to be a different mindset. And it's like, to me, the music, it's like they don't care. They're just going to go for it constantly. And for people to check that aspect out, I think it's, to me, it's very enticing. And also, I mean, to me, obviously, I've always felt like, and others have said it too, something about the organ and the guitar, it kind of crosses over into people who may not be as into quote unquote straight ahead jazz. It's going to give a little bit different vibe, so that might bring people into it as well. But yeah, definitely overall, for me, that's the hands down my favorite recording, just based on the energy alone.
Good choice.